Hello, welcome to the latest edition of the OK Preps Extra Podcast. I'm Patrick Prince, joined by Barry Lewis. Barry, it's Monday, January 23rd. Sorry about your Cowboys. I hope you're taking the season-ending loss okay now that Dallas's season is over.
I think I'm taking it better than a lot of other people are. I've heard people talk about this is the most devastating Cowboys loss in their lifetime. Like, really?
Okay, that's crazy talk.
Really? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the people who are like my age, and I'm thinking this is really more devastating than losing to San Francisco at the end of the 81 season. You've got to be kidding me. I mean, this isn't even close to being the most devastating Cowboys playoff loss to San Francisco.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what makes this loss more disappointing than the loss 4 years ago to the Rams, or the one 8 years ago to the Packers, or 6 years ago to the Packers, all in the divisional rounds. I mean, I don't get it. And say if they would have won yesterday without Tony Pollard going into Philadelphia, forget it. I mean, they're not going to win. Tony Pollard, I mean, everyone is bringing up all these issues about yesterday, like the last play of the game are some things that are really, I think, really silly. Once they lost Tony Pollard, they were in the hole. I mean, there's a reason he's a Pro Bowl running back, and no one's really talking about losing Tony Pollard to a broken leg. I mean, that was significant, along with Dak's 2 first-half interceptions. So, yeah, it was disappointing. But even if they win yesterday, it's like without Tony Pollard, I don't see them having a chance at Philadelphia the way Philadelphia played against the Giants. So,
yeah, you got a Super Bowl pick, Barry?
Well, if the Eagles play like they did the other night, I don't see anyone beating them.
And I'm rooting for Jalen Hurts too. I became a fan of his when he came to OU for that year, and he's been a better pro than I thought he was going to be. So good to see him doing well.
Yeah, do you think he'd be so much better than Baker Mayfield?
No, I did not think that. I thought Baker would be a decent pro. I really did. Not so much
decent, and I will say Baker Mayfield is a decent pro, but he was supposed to be more than decent.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be better than the decent, but All right, let's talk a little high schools, Barry. So coming off the final tournament week of the high school season, what your biggest takeaway from last week's tournament week was what?
Some super individual performances. Parker Friedrichsen, Bixby, of course, he's Notre Dame signee. He just lit it up last week. 138 points in 4 games at the Will Rogers Roper Invitational. He was unstoppable, averaging 34 plus points a game. Bixby's riding high, 12-3 right now. I mean, Parker Friedrichsen's doing what you would expect him to do. Just a tremendous year so far for him. I'm looking forward to seeing him play tomorrow night at Broken Arrow. That's going to be a blockbuster. Maybe we'll talk about that later. Jalen Montanati, who Bill Hastings is going to be writing about. Super performance at a tournament in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Averaged over 23 points a game there. Was the MVP of that tournament. And Owasso knocked off a team with couple of D1 players in it. Best team they've seen all year, and that includes Broken Arrow. So a Broken Arrow team beat Owasso. So a huge big-time victory for Owasso. Jalen Montanati and the Rams going out of state to pick up some big wins. And then there's a player that maybe not a lot of people outside of Catoosa have heard about, but I'm really impressed by. This is the first time I got to really see him in an extended amount of time. I'd seen him a couple of times previously, but Titus Miller, 6'6" junior, Catoosa. He scored 74 points in 3 games at the Port City Classic last week, and he got off to a bit of a slow start this year because he's wearing a face mask due to a broken nose suffered when he emerged with a broken nose from a showdown with Victory Christian's very talented 6'6" center Chris Mason in a fall league game. So Titus Miller and Catoosa, however, got some revenge last week in the Port City Classic. They beat Victory. But anyway, Titus Miller started the year with a face mask, and he is now just emerging as really a primetime player. He's getting comfortable without that face mask, getting more aggressive. He just had a tremendous Port City Classic tournament. Although he did miss a shot at the end that could have won the game, but still, that doesn't take the championship game. But Catoosa was in the Port City Classic finals for the first time since 1996. You know, they host the tournament, and they'd never won the championship in 57 years. So they came so close. But Titus Miller, he's a person that hasn't been talked a lot about outside of Catoosa, but remember that name. He is really emerging as a big time talent for Catoosa.
So you mentioned Broken Arrow being undefeated, Barry. So yeah, they're 14-0 heading into tomorrow night's big game. We're filming this on a Monday afternoon. How good are the Tigers?
Well, they look really good. I got a chance to see them last week against Bartlesville and David Castillo. And Connor Dow, just the Oklahoma State signee. Connor Dow, just very efficient for Broken Arrow. Broken Arrow, however, doesn't rely on him to score 30 points a game. I mean, he could if they needed him to, but they've got some balanced scoring. They had 4 different players averaging double figures in their tournament championship at the Shawnee Invitational. That was, again, very impressive. Had some really good competition over there, and they nearly lost on Friday night. Went into overtime. DJ Howell, though, hit a shot at the end of overtime. Great play. He's very talented sophomore, and he's a player to watch, definitely. So Broken Arrow survived the Shawnee Invitational. They've got 4 players who average in double figure scoring in the tournament. There's some nights when their starters will do all the scoring, some nights when they get a lot from their bench. So you just can't focus on stopping just one guy there. So that helps. And again, Connor Dow, he's a player of the year candidate.
I haven't seen him play, Barry. What kind of player is he?
He can do what you want him to do. I mean, he's very efficient. He's got a really good outside shot, but he can also take it to the basket. Just finds an open teammate. Just great team player. Just really solid all around ball player. But a lot of people just know him for his shooting.
Okay.
I mean, just good, solid all around player.
So how do you see tomorrow night's game breaking down?
I'm going to go with Broken Arrow, but I think it has a chance to be a tremendous game. Obviously, if Parker Friedrichsen can score 40, I think, and he definitely could. I think Bixby's got a shot. Parker Friedrichsen, he scored 43 in one game last week at the Roper Invitational. It was against the Memorial JV, but before you scoff at the Memorial JV, because it's a JV team, Memorial JV went 2-1 at the Rogers tournament. So speaking of Memorial, blockbuster game Tuesday night, Hale at Memorial. Memorial had to go into overtime in the season opener to beat Hale. So this is the rematch. Hale's 15-2, Memorial's 12-3. That's going to be quite a battle.
So tell me a little bit about this Hale team, Barry. I was kind of looking up and down the rankings before you and I went live, and I was maybe I shouldn't be, but I was surprised to see them 15-2, and just why don't you tell me a little bit about this Hale team?
Yeah, Hale hasn't been 15-2 since, well, I don't know if they've ever been 15-2, actually. I mean, and they've had some good teams, although it's been a while. But they had some good teams back in the 70s and 80s. But this is as great a start as they've ever had. They already set their all-time winning streak record in school history at 13, which got snapped last week. They were without a couple starters and lost at the Fort Gibson tournament in the first round. Cabron Lewis, one of the more talented players in the area. He's definitely a player worth watching. And they're just a team that believes. So, and they made such tremendous strides over the last couple of years. They only won one game 2 years ago. And then last year they got above 500, which has been a rarity for Hale basketball in the last 20 years or so. And this year they've just taken a big step forward. So Hale at Memorial, blockbuster matchup tomorrow night.
Man, no kidding. There's some good games tomorrow night. So, Barry, talk about the type. Well, I was going to say the type of year, the time of year it is. We're coming off the tournament week. It's kind of an important time of the season. Won't you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, for the large schools, there's only 2 weeks to go before the final rankings are released that determine postseason seedings and position and regional host sites, and this obsolete method, out of date method that the OSSA continues to persist in using to determine its postseason pairings. They're stuck in the 1980s on that. Some people would say they're stuck in the 1980s on the shot clock too. So it seems like a lot like 40 years ago when it comes to determining the postseason in the OSSA. The final 2 weeks of the regular season don't count at all as far as determining postseason pairings, which is ridiculous. So drives a lot of coaches crazy, but that's the way it is. So 2 weeks to go before those pairings are set. And then in the classes before that, 4A and 3A got 1 week to go. And A and B, they're set. No more games count for A and B. So that's why last week's tournaments, it was so important. Teams could really take a big step up or fall down. And now, of course, these regular season games take on added meaning these next 2 weeks. But I mean, can you imagine a system? I mean, it's like the opposite of football, where the first games you play in the season have nothing to do. They may be some of the more high profile games you play, but they've got nothing to do with how you do in the postseason. As great as the mid-first backyard bowl is between Union and Jenks, it has nothing to do with postseason pairings. But it's just opposite basketball. Games that are played in December before some teams even get all their players back from football, they count big time. Whereas, you know, the last 2 weeks of the regular season, when teams are starting to peak and they've got everyone playing, those games don't mean anything.
Have you asked about this, Barry? Why does the OSSAA continue to do it this way?
Well, apparently to them, technology hasn't changed over the last 40 years. They just say they just need all this lead time to set up everything. So, I mean, it's like 40 years ago before, I mean, you had the voting before everyone was online. I mean, they're doing it, you know, gathering the coaches' votes the same way they were doing 40 years ago. I mean, they're acting like they have to get votes the way they did 40 years ago. So.
Okay. All right. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some football. Signing day is next week, right? Next week?
Yes, it is. February 1st. It's signing day. As the next football signing period opens.
And of course, we had the early signing period in December. This is the more traditional signing day in February. Who are you going to be looking at next week?
Well, still a lot of good players out there who haven't officially signed yet, or some who haven't committed. It'll be interesting to see. As I hope everyone had a chance to read Bill Hastings' column on Metro Christian quarterback Kirk Francis, who's #1 in our all-world rankings. He's so we'll see where he goes. That'll be very interesting to see where he winds up. And of course, Union running back DJ McKinney is committed to Sam Houston State. Wrote about him in a column last Thursday, along with vertigress linebacker, the Sackmaster Reese Roller, who's committed to UCO. And there are several others out there who are not committed, who've got options. But looking to see maybe what type of late offers they might get.
What did you think of the
Like a lot of Bixby like a lot of Bixby players, for example.
What did you think of the reference in the to Francis to Paul Smith in Bill's column?
I like it. Yes, I can see a lot of similarities. Definitely.
I mean, it's baffling to me, Barry, in this day and age that someone that can fall through the cracks like that. I mean, we saw this a few years ago with Josh Jacobs, and we've talked about that at length. But I mean, you like Kirk Francis too, right? And I mean, Bill wrote about it, and you've liked him all year long. Why is some college not snatch this kid up? What's the deal?
I don't know what goes through the minds of some recruiters. I've liked Kirk Francis for ever since his sophomore year. I mean, there's some players you just feel they've got it. They've got the it factor. He's been one of those ever since then. So it seems like I've had him rated higher than about everyone else ever since I saw him lead Metro to the state championship in 2020. So I don't know. I mean, you see so many there's always a few cases of this every year that just drive you crazy. I remember back in around 2008, I guess, after the 2008 season, again, one of the top 10 players I have on my all-time high school list that we had on last week's podcast, Sean Jackson of McLean. Tulsa had to be practically begged and their arm twisted to offer him a scholarship. And then he winds up being their conference player of the year, one of their best defensive players in their last 15 years at least. But there's someone in their own backyard in McLean who wasn't offered a scholarship until the very last moment. So no matter who the coaches are, I mean, it's just not something that is on a specific coach or coaching staff, but it just sometimes puzzles you when you see a player who you think, hey, he's obviously can play. He seems like he's got the physical tools. I mean, sometimes players aren't offered that you think they should, but you can say, okay, they don't like him because he's way too small in their view. So, but on some players, there just doesn't seem to be a reason. Like Kirk Francis is not small. He's got the arm. He's got everything. So, yeah, it is baffling why Josh Jacobs. I mean, it was incredible why he wasn't offered before he was. I mean, you go on and on through the years. There's instances of players who get overlooked, at least until the last moment for some reason.
Yeah. Barry, why don't you catch us up on All World? That process is still ongoing. I know you're knee deep and all that. Why don't you kind of catch us up on that?
Yes, a lot of people have been asking, when is the All World football team going to be released, or when are the All World teams going to be released? And I can say, finally, we've got an answer. February 11th, the All World football team. February 12th, Tulsa World All State football team. And then the rest of the fall sports All World teams will follow on the 13th, 14th, and 15th.
Are you still accepting nominations? Should coaches get with you, or are you closing that down?
It's never closed until it's published. I think I've heard from almost everybody, but I know there's some coaches who haven't connected with me yet. So if they haven't connected with me, yes, I'm still open to nominations for players to. Now our final, the only thing that's closed is we've already selected our finalists, but everything else is open.
And of course, we'll have our awards banquet in the summer, as we always do. Details on that coming later. And we also have our Bill Knight Athletes of the Week in boys and girls basketball, wrestling, and swimming that are ongoing. And send the weekly nominations to you on that, Barry. Is that right?
Yes, you can send them to me. And when I talked about All World nominations, that also goes for the rest of the fall sports too. As far as it's still, if for some reason that we haven't connected with the coach, whether it's for volleyball, softball, cross country, yes. If you haven't heard from us about this process, please send me a nomination. barry.lewis@tulsaworld.com.
Also, too, Barry, we mentioned Bill Hastings' column earlier on Kirk Francis. I also want to remind people Bill did a really good interview with Bixby coach Lauren Montgomery on his podcast last week, the Bill Haston podcast. He had a good, 40-minute or so conversation with Lauren. It was real good. I got a chance to listen to it over the weekend. Lauren it's pretty good to listen to coaches talk in that sort of setting. The season's over. They're a little more relaxed, and they kind of talked about some non-football stuff. Anyway, it was a good interview. If you haven't listened to it, go check it out. Barry, what else is on your mind? Should we got more going on, or should we leave it there for this week?
Well, I guess as far as the high school scene, that's all. Of course, I'm also covering ORU basketball and what a season they are having. The men's team's 17-4, as well as the TU women's team is having a great season, and they've, of course, that'll be covered on other podcasts. But anyway, there's some exciting college basketball being played in this area, so that's also been interesting to follow. So, as far as ORU is concerned, if you haven't seen Max Asmus play yet, you've only got 5 more chances, only 5 more home games, and what a career he's had at ORU. So I'd urge people to go out and check out Max Asmus and the ORU Golden Eagles. 17-4. It's they've off to an amazing start. Right now, at this point of the season, they are playing better than the Sweet 16 team was of 2 years ago at this point.
Really? Okay. All right. All right. Well, you can check us out for free on Google, Apple, and Spotify. We appreciate you checking us out. Barry and I usually come at you once a week, Monday or Tuesday. So Barry, appreciate all the knowledge, and we'll catch up next week.
Sounds good.